You're listening to KSG Podcast. This is a short, crisp, concise, exam-oriented, edited editorial for civil services aspirants. In this podcast, we are going to talk about India unveiling G20 logo. Source for the content is the Indian Express. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the 8th of November 2022 unveiled the logo, theme, and website of India's G20 presidency. The logo bears a lotus and the message of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. Speaking at the launch via video conferencing, the Prime Minister said that lotus is a symbol of hope. Prime Minister Modi said, and I quote, "The world is going through the after effects of a disruptive, once-in-a-century pandemic, conflicts, and lot of economic uncertainty. The symbol of the lotus in the G20 logo is a representation of hope in these times. No matter how adverse the circumstances, the lotus still blooms," unquote. India will assume the presidency of the powerful G20 grouping from the current chair, Indonesia, on the 1st of December 2022 and hold the post for a year. The G20 Leaders Summit at the level of heads of state or government is scheduled to be held on the 9th and 10th of September 2023 in New Delhi. Calling India the mother of democracy, Prime Minister Modi said that India's efforts will be to ensure that there is no first world or third world, but only one world. Now, what is the significance of the G20 logo? This G20 logo is not just a symbol, the Prime Minister said, it is a message, an emotion running through our veins. It is a resolve which is now being included in our thoughts. Elaborating, the Prime Minister said that the logo reflects our idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole earth is a family, because of which India has always believed in global harmony. He said, and I quote, "The lotus flower symbolizes our Puranic heritage, our astha, that is belief, and bodhikta, that is intellectualism," unquote. Now, what is the G20? The G20 was formed in 1999 in the backdrop of the financial crisis of the late 1990s that hit East Asia and Southeast Asia in particular. Its aim was to secure global financial stability by involving middle-income countries. Its prominent members are Australia, Brazil, China, France, Germany, India, Japan, Republic of Korea, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the UK, the US, and the EU. Spain is invited as a permanent guest. The Press Information Bureau, PIB, said in a press release, and I quote, "G20 is the premier forum for international economic cooperation, representing around 85% of the global GDP, over 75% of the global trade, and about two-thirds of the world population. During the course of its G20 presidency, India will be holding about 200 meetings in 32 different sectors in multiple locations across India. The G20 summit, to be held next year, would be one of the highest-profile international gatherings to be hosted by India," unquote. The presidency of the G20 rotates every year among members, and the country holding the presidency, together with the previous and the next presidency holder, forms the Troika to ensure continuity of the G20 agenda. During India's presidency, India, Indonesia, and Brazil will form the Troika. A release by the Ministry of External Affairs said that this would be the first time when the Troika would consist of 3 developing countries and emerging economies. Now, how does the G20 work? The G20 has no permanent secretariat. The agenda and work are coordinated by representatives of the G20 countries known as Sherpas, who work together with the finance ministers and governors of the central banks. India has announced that ex-Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant would be the G20 Sherpa after Piyush Goyal. The G20 website says, on the advice of the G7 finance ministers, the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors began holding meetings to discuss the response to the global financial crisis that occurred. Since 1999, an annual meeting of finance ministers has taken place. The first G20 summit took place in 2008 in Washington, D.C., U.S. In addition to summits, the Sherpa meetings that help in negotiations and building consensus and other events are also organized throughout the year. Each year, the presidency invites guest countries. That's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. To join KSG and our courses and to crack the IELTS exam, visit ksgindia.com. You can also get a PDF of this podcast on ksgindia.com. Thanks for listening and do subscribe to our channel.